Hi, I'm Rafael, Correa, President and CFO of Blue Water, an outdoor hospitality investment, development, and management company. I've spent 15 years in outdoor hospitality, and if there's one thing that I've learned in that time, it's that the people in this industry are what make it special. This is the reason we started the Upstream podcast, to give outdoor hospitality owners and operators direct access to the leaders and innovators shaping the space. The belief behind Upstream is simple. A better informed industry is better for everyone. As the saying goes, a high tide raises all ships. Welcome to the Upstream podcast. Now, today's guest is Rob Schutter, president of Camp Jellystone, the Cincinnati-based franchisor of Yogi Bear's Jellystone Park Camp Resorts, and one of the longest tenured executives in the outdoor hospitality industry. Rob studied at the University of Cincinnati, where he earned degrees in management and marketing. He joined Camp Jellystone, then operating under Leisure Systems, Inc., in August of 1989. He would spend the next 37 years there, rising to the presidency and guiding the brand from a modest regional franchise network into one of the most recognized names in North American family camping. When Rob retires at the end of this month, he will have been with this organization for virtually the entire modern era of this industry. To understand what this career represents, Jellystone Park was founded in 1969, making it one of the longest-running campground franchise systems on the continent. The brand operates under a license with Warner Brothers, giving each of its 75-plus independently owned and operated locations access to Yogi Bear, Boo Boo, and Cindy Bear character experiences, a licensed brand advantage that sets these properties apart in a meaningful way. For 16 consecutive years prior to the post-pandemic normalization, the Jellystone system posted record revenue growth. Now, Rob didn't just run the brand, he built the infrastructure underneath of it. The Yogi Advisory Council, which gave franchisees a formal governance voice inside the system, the Club Yogi Rewards loyalty program, a cross-franchise points and redemption network active at all participating locations, a national gift card system, a centralized reservation platform, annual conferences, and education programming that operators in the field depend on. These aren't marketing programs. They're the operating systems that 75-plus independent business owners rely on to compete. Outside of Jellystone, Rob dedicated 15 years to the board of directors of what was then Arvik and now Ojai, the outdoor hospitality industry. Across two separate terms, serving as chairman during 2012 and 2013, since 2014, he has also served as a member of the board of directors of the Ojai Foundation, the charitable arm of the association that provides disaster relief, funds, educational scholarships to operations and employees across the RV park and campground sector. From January 2016 to December 2021, he simultaneously served as the president of Coney Island, a regional amusement park in Cincinnati, Ohio. Along the way, he received the Arvik Stan Martin Award in 1999. One of the industry's highest individual honors, the Arvik Chairman's Award in 2003, the Arvik Pioneer Award in 2014, which recognizes long-term impact on the sector, and the Ojai Unity Through Generosity Award in November of 2025, recognizing his years of service, mentorship, and goodwill within the outdoor hospitality industry. In December of 2021, Sun Outdoors, the outdoor hospitality subsidiary of Sun Communities, a publicly traded REIT, acquired Leisure Systems, Inc. Rob continued as the president through this transition and has led the brand under Sun Communities ownership through the years since. Now, what makes this conversation different, what I want our listeners to understand before we get into it, is the timing. Rob is retiring this month. This is the final chapter of a 50-year run. And almost poetically, as he exits, Jellystone Park is returning to his home city of Cincinnati for the first time in 20 years, with a new location opening in Mason, Ohio, just miles from Kings Island. The brand is coming home as he walks out the door. For our audience, campground owners, RV park operators, investors, anyone trying to understand where this industry has been and where it's going, there are few people alive who have seen the full arc of this transformation. Yogi Bear has been at the center of this brand since 1969. What's grown around him, the water parks, the glamping cabins, the safari tents, jumping pillows, foam parties, wagon rides, laser tag, that's a fundamentally different vacation product than what Rob walked into in 1989. And Rob watched every bit of it unfold from the inside, from 15 to 75 plus properties under the franchise over nearly 4 decades. Now, Rob hasn't written a book yet. He hasn't hosted a podcast. His public voice has lived almost entirely in trade press and annual franchise system communications, which means what you're about to hear is in many ways the most in-depth public conversation he's ever had. Rob, welcome to Upstream. It's an honor to have you.
Well, thank you, Raf. It's been great knowing you, as well as looking forward to this interview. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, no, I'm super stoked, Rob. But when we were thinking through this Upstream podcast and what we wanted it to be, and I really reflected on these just amazing conversations that I've had, and I've shared with you in the past, and for the sake of our listeners, is the openness, right, that people have in our industry to share their experiences, the wins, the learns, is one of the coolest things that I've ever seen in any industry that I've ever been a part of. And, I got that experience with you, but what was unique with you is there was this giant history book, right? It's like opening up this history book, and you were filling in so many gaps of kind of where we've been. And so, for me, as I was kind of getting my bearings and learning the ropes in this industry, you were just such a tremendous wealth of knowledge. And I can't thank you enough for all taking the time, right? For somebody you didn't really know from Adam, and filling in those gaps for me.
Well, I appreciate those comments. It's important, I think, to bestow or transfer as much information, as much knowledge as you have to individuals coming into the industry. The industry is rather large, and each one of our companies are only a small segment of that, and in some cases only really cater to certain segments of that particular market. And I think it's always important to elevate everyone around you to make that industry, that market that we're all trying to service, one that's very appealing to our guests, no matter what stage of life they are in as they move forward.
No, absolutely. Now, I know everybody who's tuning into this is going to want to hear where you think this industry is going. But I think it's important that we start at the beginning, right? We got to rewind. We got to absorb some of where it came from. I have a little, surprise little couple photos here that my producer Myra here is going to put up for us. But I'd love for you to take me back to 1989, right? Walking in the door of LSI, starting to get your arms around what this industry is. Tell me your first impressions of the RV industry.
Well, it was really interesting coming from the theme park side of the outdoor hospitality business. When you came into the campground segment, even back in the 80s and early 90s, you were coming into a situation that were very much family operated entities. We would call it affectionately the mom and pop side of the business. Very few corporate entities were involved in this particular market. Those that were really serviced maybe the senior market or the permanent side of the business, which traditionally the transient side of the business never crossed over into. So you had a lot of these operators who were really functioning quite well given what they had available to them. I mean, computers were not even used in any of the campground segments. It was always pen and paper. You had individuals who were answering phones all the time, taking reservations, and at times really diverting their attention from the operation itself and focusing in on just trying to get people to come in the door. There was no real true marketing scenario out there. The internet, I think it was a figment of somebody's imagination at that particular
point. Yeah, we couldn't even imagine the internet at that point.
We had no idea. Social media, that was just sitting in the back rooms talking with one another. So, it was very much a non-technical type of business. Coming from the theme park side, we did have some reservation systems, and we were involved in electronics and so on. We were utilizing computers and so on. So it was interesting walking in the door and seeing the different dynamics that we were going to be confronted with. So the first thing that in my mind I needed to understand is not only what did our product look like out there in the marketplace, but also to become familiar with the operators that are running these operations throughout the country. And so that's what we did. We took a very long trip, several weeks, visiting some of these locations across the country, both good and bad. From our situation, we wanted to get a very broad perspective of what we were involved with. At that time, I was working closely with Jim Ashworth, a gentleman who actually brought me into the theme park business and then transferred me over to the campground side, as well as Vic Nolting. Vic was running Coney Island at that point in time and was also an amusement park executive who was still attached to TAP Broadcasting, Great American Broadcasting, who actually owned the Hanna-Barbera studios and several other studios out there in California. Essentially, these licenses were being brought back in-house. We traveled the country visiting these particular locations.
I
Some
picture
very
you here
impressive.
with your AAA maps, right? Just trying to.
Exactly. We were traveling and staying in hotels all along the way, flying from one part of the country to the next. Fortunately, at that time, working with Taft, we did have access to a private aircraft that would enable us to go into some of the smaller airports closer to some of these locations. But you're right, taking out a map and circling the areas that they were and hoping that you were going down the right road and not making a wrong turn somewhere. In some of the towns you've never ever heard of. When we acquired the company, we went into an area called Bushkill, Pennsylvania. And I'm like, man, these names, I'm going to have to get used to all of this. But it was fun. I mean, it was eye-opening, to be honest with you. But more importantly, it was very interesting in meeting these operators one-on-one. Some of them very much in tune with what was going on, not only in the industry, but with their business as well. And others who were just looking at it as somewhat of a lifestyle, and that was it. We saw individuals who were utilizing our marks in appropriate fashion and others who were using it in a very inappropriate fashion. We saw campgrounds that never should have been called campgrounds in the first place. And so after approximately 18 months or so, we started making the decision of keeping certain locations and removing certain locations. And we ended up taking about a third of our industry or a third of our system out. And one of the most difficult things that I think I encountered was having to talk to some of these individuals who did look at these campgrounds as being their lifeline and saying to them, I'm sorry, but our desires are going in different directions. What we're ultimately looking for is not necessarily what you're trying to accomplish here. Now, some operators did push back, promising that they would adhere to what we're looking for and would try their darndest to go ahead and get their operations up to a certain level. Those who we felt were sincere, we gave them the opportunity. Some succeeded, some failed. Those others were almost happy to go ahead and get out. I mean, essentially, they weren't sure that even this new operator, such as us, coming into play was what they would be looking for. And also, I think some people, to be honest, I think at that time I was 29 years old, coming from a theme park business, not having any idea what the campground industry was like. I think many individuals were somewhat taken back on whether or not we were going to be able to lead them down the correct path. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, we did find several operators who knew that the system itself needed a change. And those operators embraced us. And those operators ended up working collectively with us to right the ship, helping us formulate more standards that could be addressed, that could be implemented across the system. And then we took those same operators and created our first advisory council, which that system had never had. And they became our sounding board. Ideas we would bounce off of them. We'd even take many of them on trips with us at our expense, taking them to other locations on a regional basis, just so they could provide to those franchisees their perspective of what we were trying to accomplish.
Mm-hmm. I read the Woodall's article, which if any of the listeners haven't read that, I strongly encourage. It's a great article. And one of the things that popped into my head when I read it, and you had to take that step backwards to take a step forwards for the sake of the brand and for the sake of the franchisees. They were really committed to seeing the brand be successful.
Yes.
When you narrowed it down to those 15, if you had to draw like a line of something that all of them, those final 15 had in common, what was that kind of the common thread that ran through all of those entrepreneurs that helped you kind of rebuild the brand as the foundation?
Say overall, they walked the talk. You saw that not only did they have enthusiasm, but that enthusiasm could be found in their operations. They were run appropriately. They had an aesthetic nature of their parks, which were one that were inviting to guests coming in. So they took what elements that they had available to them and utilized them in the appropriate fashion, or into a fashion that you would say, hey, you give them a little guidance here and provide them some other elements that they might be looking for. We've got something we can work with. And their excitement was just unbelievable, despite all of the hardships that they had faced from the previous ownership, who I actually was operating the company as a discontinued operation, unbeknownst to a lot of the franchisees. And that in itself, from our standpoint, was one of the main reasons why the license itself was reacquired. But then going in and talking with these individuals, sitting down in their homes and allowing them to tell you point blank the good, the bad, the ugly that they've experienced and what they see. But then also seeing their operations and saying there's a caring nature here. There's a desire to provide the concept in reality to our guests. Mm-hmm. And so we felt we had some operations from which we could grow the brand. The passion that people talked about the characters when we went into those operations convinced us that we had something here still. Mm-hmm. We just needed to refine it. We needed to hear their concerns. We needed to figure out exactly then what type of direction do we need to take from here. We didn't even sell franchises for 3 years. We were more focused on solidifying those that we had in our system, working with those who wanted to stay and create something nice. From the core of 15 that were very, very good, we probably had 52 on paper at that point in time after we had eliminated a lot that were iffy what was going to happen there. I don't think we lost but 3 or 4 out of that group. The rest of them put a concerted effort into their operations and came along with and agreed to go ahead and follow the direction we were trying to take the company. And overall, I think ended up becoming some of our biggest advocates as well.
Oh, absolutely. I've met some of those folks, and they also, great historians of the business and gigantic fans of you. And what a gamble, right? To go, to eliminate so much of the franchise, but you can't build on a bad foundation, right?
You cannot.
And as a franchise, we have, several franchises that we own and manage as well here mm-hmm. at Blue Water. And we've had to learn, the essence of the brand. We've made mistakes, but the funny part is if we just listened to Rob the first time, we would have been much better off.
I'm not sure about that. I think everybody's got to learn the situation at their own pace. But even for us, we went in not saying that we knew everything. We wanted to learn as well. Yeah. Coming from a theme park background, I think that enabled us to forge forward on introducing some of these new concepts to the franchisees. It's an interesting business when you look at it from the Jellystone side. We look at ourselves as really being a singular market. We're going after families with young children, typically preteen or young teen. And we look at ourselves as being the gatekeepers of the industry, introducing individuals to camping in some aspects. They may have camped at a state park or some other municipal style park. This is the first time that from a commercial side of the business mm-hmm. where they've come in and seen something different. And when you try to provide another level of expectation or experiences, you need to deliver on those, and then you begin building your consumer base. And that's where we started. And it was trying at times. I think it was painful at times, not only for us, but for some of the individuals who were let go in the system. But I think overall it enabled us to really create that foundation, like you pointed out, and which we could go ahead and build on. And I think it also demonstrated out into the marketplace that we weren't looking to be just as we had been. We were looking to refine ourselves. We were looking at trying to create something special, that hadn't been seen. I remember saying at one of our earlier symposiums, we are going to bring our system into the 20th century kicking and screaming. But, we blink and we're in the 21st century, and we're still doing some of those nuances at this point in time. But the old saying, we've come a long way, baby, and there's still a long way to go.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's kind of where I want to take the conversation, right? So, there's that early stage, you rebuild the foundation, you start adding franchises. Take me to the part where, it really started to shift from being that single owner operator site, and you started seeing those multi-park owners, bigger capital started coming into the space. It stopped being just family businesses, which it was probably at some point it was easily 95% or more of the business.
Easily so.
Yes. Yeah. So talk to me about those days, right? And the Blue Waters of the world, the Northgates, the Jenkins organization, some of these folks that are and Sun Communities, right? All of these folks are, big Jellystone owners, operators, and, you've created this really kind of beautiful coexistence because there's still a lot of prolific individual owners in the Jellystone franchise system as well. I'm thinking about, Jellystone down there north in Texas, down in Burleson, that's probably one of the coolest Jellystones that I've been to. I've heard about this one out in Zion that is just, next level. And so you've kind of created this really neat ecosystem where both, the individual owner operator can exist, but also these corporate owners. Tell me about that time period, kind of how that shift happened and how you met that challenge.
That's an interesting point. Having dealt with single park operators, or even when we look at it, single park operators who acquired another location. I mean, they were still considered family style operations who maybe had a branch of their family, their son go out and take over another property. We were experiencing that in the early or the late 90s and into the early 2000s. It was probably, I do believe, to be honest with you, the very first experience that we encountered with a corporate entity coming into our system was when our now parent company, Sun, acquired a park that at the time we called North Java. It's currently called Western New York. They acquired that from one of our strong operators at the time, Scott Crompton. And I do remember going into Sun's corporate headquarters up in Michigan and sitting down with John McLaren, who is still with the company, and talking about this acquisition that he was doing. And to be honest with you, a little fearful on our side because this was the first time that we're coming into contact with a very large corporate entity, one that was definitely focused business in a different segment of the business in this industry, not necessarily on the family camping, but to come into that office and have those discussions, and having those discussions even further where they say, they're going to be looking at acquiring other properties, both that are not in our system and in our system, and we'll be looking for other opportunities to bring locations in. And so they began acquiring other Jellystones, and they were probably the most prolific group until Northgate came along, who then also started acquiring properties. I do believe the very first property that Northgate acquired with us was Corryville, Pennsylvania, which was another family-run operation. So we started seeing a lot of these family operations changing hands and going into the corporate side. Now, those types of relationships required a little bit more effort on our part in working with those corporations because they're at a different level. They have different expectations than those at the family operators. I think it's safe for me to say that when you look at single park operators, or as we call single SPOs, their exit strategy is somewhere down the road to sell or maybe have a second generation come in. Corporate entities, no, they're looking for a return. And so it's really important for us to demonstrate to them the consistency of the performance and being able to try to project in a realistic manner what's going to happen as time goes forward. So I think in the early 2010s, right up through COVID, we started seeing a tremendous number of groups that have come in. Both on the large side, we had ELS come in. They acquired two of our really large operations at one time, Amboy, Illinois, and then Fremont, Fremont, Wisconsin, both which were relatively large operations at that point in time. They went into the ELS fold. Then we started seeing smaller multi-park operators entering into our system, but that really didn't start transpiring until during COVID and shortly thereafter COVID. So we've even seen an elevation, or not an elevation, but a
increase,
a transformation in the process of who's coming in. So, when you look at Sun has 200 some odd, properties in their portfolio. You have individuals like 4 Points who have maybe 10 properties in their portfolio, or Great Escapes that may have like 18 or 19 properties in the portfolio. So we've seen the large corporations, ELS, Sun come in, and then we've seen the smaller corporations coming in as well. And I firmly believe we will continue to see that type of entrance into our system. And right now we stand at about 50-50, 50 corporately owned, 50 still operated by family or small operations in the system. So it's something that we found that forced us to change our operating style as well.
Almost help elevate the game for everybody.
And that's what happened. You started dealing with providing additional services to the corporate entities and refining what you were offering, i.e. reservation systems, upgrading your website, developing apps and then integrating the apps along with your reservation systems and your online websites. So it has required us to consider continually upgrade internally ourselves things that we are offering out there in the marketplace. We were the first system who brought in a loyalty rewards program, a true loyalty rewards program that wasn't a discount card or a discount program. It was one where individuals who stayed more often, had more stays at your properties, had the opportunity to build points which could be redeemed for not only merchandise, but also for stays at the locations. So we had to elevate our game. We had to take a look at some of those things that were out there, gift cards and so on, that became very important for those new segments that are in our industry.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The evolution's been kind of wild to see it. And also like the amenity. Talk to me about what a Jellystone looked like back in 1989 and now how these Jellystones are being amenitized today. I mean, it's always the character experience has kind of always ran through and has been kind of the foundation of the Jellystone. But this amenity situation, I call it an amenity war, right? It's just like escalating every time you got one up.
Escalating. You're always looking for that next new thing.
Yeah.
Wow. When we first came into the industry, RVs and tents were the biggest portion of the business, probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 95% of the business. Those operations who did have cabins, they were just the primitive style cabins. They were a hard-sided tent. Maybe had running water in there. That was about it. One day, to be honest, I'm walking around the park, one of our parks, with, at that time, our VP of operations, Dean Crawford. And Dean and I were just talking, and I'm walking around. And I said, one of the things that I think I see here is, we're going after the families. And what is, when they come in and stay in our cabins, what's the one thing that is problematic? And Dean's like, well, it's a tent, so they have to keep moving. They got to bring in everything. I said, yes, but mom or dad in the middle of the night has to get up and take their kids to the restroom. And I'm like, we have to look at a way to end this. This just can't happen, especially with our market. So one of the very first amenities that we started to put in were full service cabins, and talking to a lot of the cabin manufacturers that were out there. I mean, park models were already in existence, no question. But large scale use within the campground industry was somewhat tempered. KOA had done very well in creating and bringing in cabins into the industry, but they focused again on the mansard roof style that were primitive in nature. We were going after families, and that convenience factor is something that we were always focusing in on. Though when Trent Hershenson came in as our marketing VP several years ago, he and I were talking, and he asked me what I saw as being the biggest benefit for the Jellystone system. He was asking, do you see it as the characters? Do you see it as, the cabin or the upscale cabins and so on? I said, no, it's the experience, stupid. It's what people come in, they sleep for 8 hours out of the day. They have 16 other hours that we have to fill. Okay. Yep. That's what we need to do. We have to give them a reason to want to come. We started with the cabin program, and it was a hard sell in some of the situations to the park.
You're going to spend what?
Yeah, exactly. You want me to, wait a minute, you mean I got to put in a sewer system and a water system?
Yeah.
What? No. But we had individuals who were willing to do that. And all of a sudden, we started showing the return. And it was one of the fastest returns on investment that the parks themselves could see.
Oh, yeah.
And so we started seeing that explode. Right now, that encompasses 35% of our total business. So it's a big segment. And despite, when you look at all the numbers, it has been the only segment that has not shown a downturn since we started keeping track of the financial growth in the various areas that we have in our system. And I don't see it abating anytime soon. So cabins were the first thing. Then we started looking at elevating our activities program, introducing things that had a price associated with it, but the guest got to take something back with them, whether it was a tie-dye t-shirt, whether it was a ceramic piece, whether it was a candy bar bingo, things along that line. Again, focusing in on the experience and looking at things that, you ask parks to put a lot of these park models in. Okay, then we came in with things that were not so intensive, monetary intensive, capital intensive, to help continue to grow their revenue. So we elevated that. The third thing that I think exploded for us was the spray grounds. We started in with very small water play structures, call them water cannons, call them dumping buckets, things of that line, but
Splash
nothing
pads,
major.
yeah.
Yeah, just a little splash pad, something you'd see at other locations. Then we saw franchisees, especially Northgate, who expanded those even further and created, from a license standpoint, we don't say water parks, but expanded features being offered within the spray grounds. And those, in essence, catapulted us into a whole nother arena. That's when we started really seeing that we started capturing the non-traditional camping market. People who were accustomed to going to hotels and going to the Great Wolf Lodges and so on, and having those types of experiences, coming in and settling into an RV park. People thought campgrounds, you always had to have an RV, but all of a sudden, with the explosion that we found in the RV side or the vacation rental side of the business, coupled with some of those activities that we started adding into our locations, it became a well-rounded package, and individuals began coming to our parks in droves. That's the essence of, as you talked earlier, where we started seeing 16 years of tremendous growth.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't just because we were adding operations. What we saw were that our existing franchisees were expanding.
Building it up.
They were trying to keep up with the demand that was coming into the parks. So we saw a large expansion in the number of sites being offered at each one of our locations. Today, on average, Jellystone is approximately 240 to 250 sites, which in our industry is relatively large. But we have parks that are at 800 sites, that are totally dedicated to transient. 15-20% of our business is seasonal, yes, but our market is still those vacation rentals and the transient business coming in from the RV side. So those elements all came into play. And we started adding in the Gaga pits and some other activity programs that could be added to the recreational package that we have. Jumping pillows, jumping pads, water play structures out on whether in lakes or ponds. All of those elements have just exploded onto a lot of our entities. Not everybody has a splash pad, but everybody can put in a jumping pad or a jumping pillow, or adding in a water play structure in the lake, a climbing structure of some type. So those are the elements that enabled us to keep pace with the demands with the consumer that we were attracting. And I think what enabled us even further was when COVID hit. We initially, everybody was fearful of what was happening to COVID. Campgrounds weren't allowed to open. We had difficulty in even having employees go to the locations, and there were a lot of operators who were saying this is doomsday. This is the end of our industry. Fortunately, several states took the tack that campgrounds and their sites are already separated by a distance, so they enabled some of these operations to stay open. They may have capped the number of individuals that they could have come in, but at least they allowed us the opportunity to operate. And all of a sudden, people who were homebound, who couldn't go out except maybe go walk at a park, found out that you could go to a campground and at least get out of the house, get out and have the kids do something. And, lo and behold, 18, 19, 20, in the 2000s, we just continued to see our business grow. And then you saw all of the corporate entities wanting to come into this space because of what they saw as far as the returns and the growth in revenues that the parks were showing. And we focused on that. And I think that's where we have been able to be resilient in downtimes as it relates to the consumer. When we were acquired by Park River, which is the entity that was in place between Great American and, of course, Sun, the owner at that time was Ron Walker Sr. And Ron one day told me, he said, the reason I'm getting into this space, Ron Walker was president of American Financial Corporation, which in Cincinnati is one of the largest insurance companies in the country. and he was president of that. And he was buying these small recreational companies for his family business. And he said, the one thing that I have determined is that in the United States, the consumer base will always try to recreate one way or the other, no matter what is happening, no matter how bad their financial situation might be, they will try to recreate. And that's what I want to focus my businesses on, are those businesses that have that recreational aspect associated with them. Man before his time, unfortunately, we lost him early, but he helped us understand the importance of what we were providing out there in the marketplace. And we just continued to hold on to that as we move forward.
No, it's awesome. People that, you always love meeting people that can see it before it happens.
Exactly. But for me, I was afforded the opportunity being associated on ARVIC boards and having the ability to go to various trade shows and talking to operators who were non-Jellystones and picking their brains. Some of their things that they were offering inside their parks were definitely applicable to our system itself. And I'd bounce ideas off of them. The best idea is a stolen idea. I'm the first one to say that. But I was never one who felt that we knew everything. And there were so many individuals out there who have different thoughts, different ways of doing the business. I mean, one of the biggest changes that we did see just from a functionality standpoint was when parks started to put in unisex restrooms and so on. It enabled us to cut down on the overall cost that was required to provide those types of facilities. That didn't come from us. I saw it at one of the other locations, and that in itself has taken off. Yeah. You increase your capacity, and while at the same time reducing, your overall footprint out there in the parks, and enabling you to put monies towards something else. And then also, of course, with the ever evolution of the park models of the vacation rentals. We used to have the single ones. Yes, they had a restroom and they had a shower room. Now we've got kitchenettes. Now we have 2 bedrooms. Now we have decks on top. It's amazing the evolution of what those vacation rentals have done and what it has meant to our industry as a whole, not only to the Jellystone system, but the industry as a whole.
Yeah. It's been very exciting. The park model business, we actually got into it ourselves. We have a sister company called the Great Outdoor Cottage.
Yes, you do.
And so we're big believers in the park model industry and the business as a whole, and see a bright future for that in a lot of avenues, not just the campground space. But I want to circle back to, you mentioned ARVIC, which is obviously now OHI, the outdoor hospitality industry. And you have a prolific track record as an industry advocate, spending time with the industry association. Talk to me a little bit about your perspective on the importance of our industry association, or really any industry association, and why you committed so much effort to them. I'd really like to hear kind of from somebody who's been there, done that. I am now serving on the OHI board as a secretary. I'm in year 2, still learning the ropes, but you're a legend in that space. I got to attend the past chairman's meeting and got to meet the collection of legends that have led that organization. I'm curious, for everybody out there that's maybe thinking about getting more involved, or why should I join the association? Talk to a little bit about why it's so important, please.
I think the biggest reason is advocacy. I mean, every state has an association. It's their own little fiefdom, okay? And you deal with state issues. The campground industry, though, isn't solidified in one particular state. It's large. And in our case, the Jellystone system, being located in 27 states as well as several provinces in Canada, we have to look at it from a global standpoint. ARVIC, now OHI, really was the only instrument that was out there for us to have that type of exposure and to try to bring in regulatory things into the campground segment that were important. When you look at 1194, the ANSI standard, which governs campgrounds, that's not state specific. That is a national type of program. In order for us to be able to affect change that affects us across the board, I mean, your company is not just situated in Maryland. Your company is scattered all over. We have a vested interest in making sure that we are able to enable our brands, our businesses, our industry to survive and adapt to what's going on out there in the marketplace, but also on a regulatory situation. I think from that aspect, the OHI is an instrument that enables us to do that. We're able to get in and see congressmen and senators and so on and try to influence in a positive manner. We're not out there trying to look for an easy way out. We're just looking for sensible regulation as it relates to our industry. And I think OHI and the board members and those individuals that are associated with this association are all keen on that. OHI gives you that opportunity to do that. I also looked at it from a selfish standpoint. When we talked about leisure systems earlier on, now Camp Jellystone, we had to start thinking outside of the box, and we had to start looking at being able to connect with other operators. And definitely, yes, you can go to a state association trade show and so on, but anyone that was anybody in our industry always attended what ARVIC or OHI had. Those were operators that were very much in tune with what's going on, not only within their state, but on the national level. It gave us another platform that we could show our brand, show what we were trying to do to those individuals that were out there. So those were two classical points that enabled me to have that desire to focus in on that area. Then selfishly too, having dialogue with individuals that are of the same mindset. They want to see this industry grow. They want to see this industry expand. They wanted to see it evolve. Those individuals are associated with OHI. It is what it is. And I felt that trading ideas, bouncing ideas off one another, having the ability to have these conversations with like-minded individuals were important for us to grow and to be part of an industry that we felt had a lot of opportunity to affect the way that we do business as we grow and move forward into the future.
No, I've had a similar experience. I love the networking component, with the vendors, with other owners. I mean, I leave there just like with ideas coming out of my eyeballs and ears because it's such an exhilarating time, right? It's like this shared energy that just is a multiplicative factor. Let's pivot to the future, right? Let's pivot to what's happening now and where you see it going. I mean, you have such an incredible perspective that I think, valuable to owners and operators that might not be retiring this month, who still have to slug it out here for a little bit longer. You have the big hotel brands are on the fringe now with the postcard cabins and the under canvases and the auto camps, right? They all have affiliations or some sort of, relationship at that level. So, and those things are, knocking on the door of the RV resort campground world. We have, sluggish post-COVID demand growth. All these variables that we're facing today. I'm curious, are you still bullish on the industry? What do you think happens next?
I think you'll still will see a considerable amount of
Headwind?
I see headwinds, but I see more and more properties being purchased, acquired.
Consolidation.
Consolidation is going to continue. There's no question in my mind. I think many of the single park operators, the individual operators, came out of COVID really worn out, run down. Not from an operation standpoint, but just for what they had to be confronted
They made some
with.
money, but at what cost?
And exactly at what cost to them. Yeah. So I think we'll still see a lot of smaller operators coming in and buying multiple parks. I still see that happening. I do see a very strong opportunity for the management companies that are out there, such as yourself and others. There are some operators who are not willing to part with their assets, but they are looking for someone to come in and operate it for them. And even some of the larger operators that are out there are now falling back on management companies to come in and manage their assets or their portfolios as they move forward.
Right.
That's going to be a big scenario that's out there in the industry. I'm not sure that we'll see a lot of the large operations still looking at acquiring those properties that are viewed as transient in nature. I think they see those as being more having more fluctuation, more volatility out there, which I think we are experiencing at this point in time. But I do believe that this period that we're in sort of reminds me a little bit, not as much under the same scenario, but when you look back at 2008, 2009,
Post
when we
financial
had
crisis.
financial situation.
Yeah.
At that point in time, even was a new up. I mean, that was the phrase that everybody was using. Here, we're still seeing some growth. Part of it is designed on or being affected because of rising prices, rates, and so on. And I think that has maybe artificially inflated revenues that we're seeing out there at that point in time. But the one market that I still have a lot of faith in is the VR market, the vacation rental market. And I
Mhm.
think that in itself is a market that I don't see diminishing whatsoever. I see it expanding and growing even further. I see it even supplanting a lot of transient RV sites as we move forward. Um, Last year in the RV sales business, from the information that we've all been able to garner, it wasn't a good year for RV sales. It
Mhm.
definitely wasn't good for RV travel. And the beginning of this year has shown almost the same. I just read a report where RV shipments were down almost 11% last month or whatever. I think all that points to a transitioning going on even further in that particular market, which definitely affects how we do business going forward. I think one of the biggest challenges that we're all going to be facing, though, is management. I mean, when you look at trying, I know in your case, even in our case, you find a good manager, you've got competition out there from every other organization that's going on. Everybody is trying to find competent managers who can come in and run these facilities that have multi levels of business, multi levels of operations going on at the same time. That's going to be key for all of us because I cannot be at our locations on a daily basis. We have to put trust in those individuals who are going to be operating those facilities. I think key management is going to be one challenge that we have going forward. But
It
you
makes or
know,
breaks you, right? A good GM on property literally makes or breaks you every single time.
it'll save
If I
you
learned
from getting the gray
anything,
hair
that
that
is
I
like the
have.
one
Okay,
truth that I know.
absolutely. I do credit Ojai in seeing that and having always put assets and resources towards the school,
Yeah.
the George and Leary Foundation,
Yeah. The outdoor
National
hospitality
School.
school certification program, it's powerful. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think individuals who are looking to get into this space, it is key for them to go ahead and attend that school, whether they're part of an association or not. If you want to be in this industry, get your feet wet, go to that school. The instructors there are superb. They've really changed up the curriculum to where it is meaningful and provides what I believe to be a good, sound foundation for you to be able to step into this space and into operations that are out there. Maybe not necessarily exactly into a GM role, but an assistant GM role to
Yeah.
where you can gain experience and move forward. So I think that is a challenge that we're going to have going forward. I see a lot of individuals who are looking at getting into this space by building from the ground floor up. You mentioned Zion before. Scott Nielsen, who built that property out there. It's a beautiful piece of property. He probably put more money in there than he ever could imagine. Now, he picked a piece of property that he had some operational challenges or developmental challenges, but he hit those head on and was able to create what I believe to be one of the nicest new resorts that have been built in a period of time. But it hasn't detracted him. He's looking at building another resort near Bryce Canyon. I'm hoping to get out there. I've seen the property that he's looking at. I'm hoping to get out there to see the groundbreaking ceremony when he gets ready to do it. Um, when individuals get into this industry, it's not uncommon for you to take a look and see, not counting land costs, $100,000 to $150,000 per site on an
Yeah.
average basis across the
It's a
board.
real thing.
It's not cheap.
No,
It's
it's not
not
for the
cheap.
faint
So
of
you
heart.
need to be capitalized. You need to have sound funding to get in there. And you have to have a plan that says you're going to be lean for 2 or 3 years before you start realizing exactly what you can pull out of this business. So don't overbuild. Do
Yeah.
not go in it slow. Build your facilities to handle the occupancy that you have and the business that you need and grow from there as your revenues grow. People are always looking for a finished business or a finished piece, a finished operation for them to go visit. They don't want to see construction going on all the time
No.
and seeing what could be the next time they come. They want to be able to experience something when they get there.
Yeah, that's the advice I give any prospective developer that really wants to get stress test your investment, right? Whatever you think it's
Stress
going to
test your
do,
investment.
double your ramp period, cut your assumptions in half. And if you're still happy with the deal, then, press forward. But don't go into a deal where everything has to go right. That's like
It's
the
not.
worst possible scenario. And there was, there's no doubt, and I know you've seen it. There was a bit of a gold rush, right, from people that didn't know anything about this space and its kind of uniqueness in its operational intensity, right? They came from these other real estate asset classes and just bit off more than they could chew. Didn't really have the right data to underwrite the deals. The assumptions were generally flawed from the beginning. Maybe paid a little too much to get into the game.
Yes.
And that's where there's a lot of pain in this kind of post-COVID normalization. And at the end of the day, in real estate, I think time heals all wounds. But the question
Yes.
is, do you have the time?
Do you have the time? I still think we're probably going to be in a funk for a couple more years. I look at our business. One of the things or areas, one of the consumer segments that we really got to begin focusing back on is what I call is the true blue collar factor that's out there. We can't lose sight of what our core market was and still
Yeah.
is, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. And we've got to again attract those individuals and having it still look as an affordable option for them. Our pricing mechanism as it stands right now has really put us in direct competition for from a lot of other outdoor types of businesses, and people have choices now. We need to get back to what we believe in and provide. Yes, we still have to provide a certain level of capitalization into the properties and provide those unique experiences, but we don't have to build these humongous elements. We don't have to convert our spray grounds into water parks. I mean, all of a sudden, that is a whole nother array of challenges that we all have. The other thing that I think we're experiencing, I don't have an answer for it at this point in time. We're looking for it within the industry, but insurance rates. I mean, for the longest time, our industry was never confronted with some
Yeah.
of the price increases that other operations, other outdoor hospitality types of businesses experience. But boy, that's changed. Rightly, wrongly, whatever, that market has caught up with us. And we need to figure out a way to address that as an industry, because it's not just affecting these large corporations who have all of this massive amenities inside their properties. It's affecting the mom and pops too. It's affecting the small operators. You could usually figure 4 to 7% of your operating revenue to be associated with insurance. Not anymore. I mean,
It's
you're
double
looking at some
digits.
double digits. Some parts are at 20%.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big nut to crack. That's almost more than their
Debt
staffing
service. Yeah.
wages. Yes, or debt service.
It's
Exactly.
crazy. No, it's gotten out of control. It's something that we're, super high on our priority list. It's also, if you're thinking about doing development, you better have a good idea what that number is, because that can blow up your pro forma pretty quick. It's something, if we're
Yes.
underwriting new deals, we really want to make sure we understand that. It's kind of one of the big checkpoints for us. Absolutely.
Yes. It doesn't diminish my excitement for the industry. I mean, I've
Yeah.
seen, in my previous year life as a theme park operator or being in the theme park business, they went through a lot of rough edges and a lot of rough times too, both on the insurance side, capitalization, and so on. But we have something that's a little bit more unique in the sense that we are a business that is driven by direct consumer contact. We have the ability from our side to affect the guest experience and the guest relationship with the operator. When you can get into that particular situation and have your guest come away with a feeling that they are important to you as an operator, that can help us overcome a lot of the situations that were there and build back that trust and that desire to come to our facilities once again.
No, I love that. I love that you're still bullish on it. Makes me feel good. Still.
I have loved this space for the last 37 years. Yes, up and down, but I believe in the people. I believe in the individuals that are getting involved in this space, in this industry. But more importantly, I believe what we can offer to the consumer. It's something of, call it escapism, but I still go back to that terminology. It's the experience, just stupid. You provide them something that makes them feel good, that they can enjoy with their families. It's something that they're willing to do over and over again.
Maya Angelou said, they don't remember what you said or what you did, but they always remember how you made them feel. And
Exactly. That's a
it's that
very good
feeling,
point. Very good
yeah,
point.
that really is that anchor for any guest experience. So we're drawing here to the end of our time. I'd like to just ask you, this is a kind of a personal, like, passion of mine, right, is the art of leadership, right? The art of being a leader, leading an organization like you have for as many years as you have, taken it from where it was to where it is, right? Strip away the industry, strip away the franchise, right? Just to the kind of pure concept of leadership. If you had to give advice to a young professional who is just starting or a few years into their career about kind of your philosophies of leadership that have gotten you to this point in your career, what would you boil that down to?
Be open to advice. I had a priest friend of mine one time tell me, I don't know what I don't know. And I try to live by that, meaning that, yes, I can have a lot of knowledge somewhere, but learning from others and distilling it down then into the way that you do management, the way that you interact with people is core to making success, making yourself a success. But more importantly, being able to then disseminate that down to the core individuals in your team, in your company. The thing that gives me the greatest gratitude is to see some of these young individuals, especially those associated in Camp Jellystone, the excitement that they have for the brand and not tempering that excitement. Let them go ahead and make mistakes. You know what? You can overcome mistakes. You can't overcome enthusiasm. You can't create enthusiasm.
Yeah.
That has to come from within.
Nurture it.
And so I don't know what I don't know. I pick up information from the young team members that are part of us. I encourage them to think outside the box. Be yourself. Make sure that you make the types of contacts that you need to. Draw from those individuals their experiences, their knowledge, and use it in the best way that you can as an individual, as a manager, as a leader within your particular department or whatever. Collectively, then those individuals working together will bring forth a concept, bring forth a business, bring forth an operating philosophy that can be infectious. I think you're nothing without that team behind you. And in my case, I've always said, people talk about the changes that I made. I may have had ideas, but it's the individuals that work with me that enable that to be brought to you have to rely on people, and you have to give them the ability to grow and use their own experiences, their own knowledge, their own interpretation of how they have to convey it to individuals out there in the marketplace. Don't temper that. Don't try to form everybody into my image and likeness. That's not the way that it is.
Yeah, embrace the differences, right?
Embrace the differences, because those differences make you stronger in the long run.
That's beautiful advice, Rob. I appreciate that. Sometimes you get so zoned in on kind of where you're going, you forget to kind of look around and necessarily appreciate, the inputs that are right in front of your face, right beside you.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even discussions with you. I mean, you come from the hotel side of the business, and there are a lot of nuances from that type of business that can be drawn into our space and making changes, making differences happen. Never think that you know everything. Always be adaptable, always be pliable, and always seek out individuals who have experiences in other areas, other related businesses, and try to capture what information, what knowledge they have, and what has worked and what hasn't worked. That's the whole idea. You don't have to recreate the wheel. There are so many people out there that have had failures or successes. And as you said at the very beginning of the podcast, you've never seen an industry that's not so forthcoming with sharing their own ups and downs, their own successes and failures. And you can learn from them and make sure that you don't do the same mistakes. You can learn from them, enhance what they have found to be a successful introduction into their park, and even make it even better for you, no matter what you're doing.
It's great advice. It's actually a big part of my pitch. Whenever I'm pitching our management services, I always say, look, you're really paying me to not make all the mistakes that I've already made. That's really what you're paying me for.
Learn from what I have experienced in the past.
Yeah. That's one of our kind of big catchphrases there, is that you're paying me to not make the mistakes I've already made.
Absolutely.
So Rob, I can't thank you enough for being on here. This has just been an awesome conversation, and I'm so excited to, get this out into the world and let everybody else kind of enjoy and embrace these ideas, and again, learn some of this background and history of what shaped this industry. I don't know what's coming next. I hope we get to play another round of golf together soon. What's next? Kind of any big plans? Anything exciting kind of in this post-retirement? Like any trips? What are we doing?
I think I'm just going to take a step back. Yes, play some golf. My wife has a honey-do list that's a mile long that I got to start addressing.
It's only 37 years overdue.
Absolutely. And plus, my kids have gotten to the age where it's great for interaction. In the position that I was, I did miss some of their growing up. Thank God my wife was very understanding and, did well with raising our kids. Now it's time to experience and enjoy life with them a little bit. People have talked to me about doing other things in the industry. I'm not there yet. I want to step back and, take a deep breath and maybe do a few other things not associated or things that I've had to put off or not be able to do for a while. But the one thing I will say is that the contacts that I do have in this industry, I'm not going to lose sight of. I'm going to keep talking to them. I mean, many of them become very good friends, even outside of this business world. And I think that is one of the strengths that I can say that I pulled out of this industry is I have found some people that I can just carry on discussions with that have nothing to do with business and it's good old
life philosophy, right?
Amen. You got it.
No, well, so, again, thank you. Please don't be a stranger. I won't let you be a stranger, but I'm just going to say, please don't be a stranger. We will certainly keep it.
I'm sure I'll run into you, no question whatsoever, as we move along, sir.
But I do wish you the absolute best in retirement. Please enjoy your family and, those things that might be on that bucket list. Go after them, buddy.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate it. And best of luck to you in Blue Water, too.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right.